Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the Taratala warehouse collapse in Calcutta. It's an absolute tragedy, and we really need to look closely at how and why this disaster unfolded. We'll be relying on the facts on the ground, forensic engineering principles, and the ongoing investigations to truly understand the anatomy of this massive failure. Let's get right into it. We have to start with this sobering number right here, 11. 11 lives were tragically lost, and around 20 others were injured when this massive under-construction structure just gave way on June 24, 2026. To understand how we even get to a horrific number like this, we have to look past the rubble and examine the whole chain of events that led up to it. So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover the Taratala warehouse collapse, the rescue operation, ignored warnings and red flags, why the roof failed, the investigation and arrests, and finally, the citywide fallout. All right, starting with Section 1, the Taratala warehouse collapse. We need to establish exactly what went down on that Wednesday afternoon at Transport Depot Road in South Kolkata. So it's roughly 12:05 p.m. An under-construction warehouse situated on land leased by the Syama Prasad Mukherjee port to a company called Behera Brothers suffers a catastrophic structural failure. And the timing here is critical. This happened exactly while workers were pouring wet concrete that's known as casting work on the upper floors. Just imagine the immense sudden weight being applied to the structure all at once. The human element here is just devastating. Eyewitnesses described a horrifying scene. Massive iron beams and concrete crumbling in an instant. With an estimated 50 to 60 workers on site at the time, survivors described hearing dozens of trapped workers crying out for help from beneath all that twisted steel and debris. It's a truly chilling picture. Moving on to Section 2, the rescue operation. Obviously, an urgent, massive operation was launched right away to save those trapped. Now, the crucial point to take away here is the incredible coordination. You had the national and state disaster response forces working shoulder to shoulder with Kolkata Police and Fire Services. But notably, the Indian Army's Eastern Command actually deployed 7 specialized columns. They even set up a fully equipped 10-bed emergency medical facility right there on the site. Because of this rapid, multi-agency deployment working essentially on a war footing, 31 people were successfully pulled from the rubble. And this part is fascinating because it brilliantly illustrates how modern rescues are actually conducted. The Indian Army utilized Advanced Ground-Penetrating Radar, or GPR. See, instead of just blindly moving debris, which frankly can cause secondary collapses, GPR detects movement and actual pulse signals deep beneath the rubble. Combined with mobile tower data and inserted cameras, rescuers knew exactly where to deploy their heavy gas-cutting machinery. It's literal life-saving tech. But the question we always have to ask in this explainer is, could this whole tragedy have been prevented? That leads us to Section 3, ignored warnings and red flags. We'll take a look at this timeline because it tells a very revealing story. More than a month before the disaster, local labor unions were explicitly raising alarms. On May 11th, the dock labor union actually sent a letter demanding to see the construction permissions for this exact plot. They asked for a halt to the work, and they flagged the involvement of unauthorized contractors. Then, on June 11th, the CITU union warned the Port Authority again about safety violations. Yet despite all this, the construction continued right up until the fatal collapse on June 24th. Which brings us to Section 4, why did the roof fail? Let's dive into the forensic investigation to actually understand the physical failure of the structure itself. To understand a failure like this, forensic engineers don't just guess. They follow a very strict methodology. First, investigators start with site documentation. They map exactly how the beams fell before the site is even cleared. Next, they move to material testing in a lab to check if the steel and concrete actually met safety standards. And finally, they do a design evaluation. This is where they compare the original blueprints to actual building codes to figure out if the structure was ever mathematically capable of holding the intended weight. When you apply that process and compare standard structural requirements to the preliminary findings at Taratala, well, a pretty grim picture emerges. West Bengal's chief minister, after speaking with engineers at the site, noted that this didn't look like weather-related soil subsidence. Actually, scratch that. It was much more direct. The iron beams simply couldn't handle the massive load of the wet concrete casting. The framework bent, bolts allegedly slipped right out of their joints, and reports indicate the structural design itself may have been fundamentally flawed from the get-go. All right, Section 5, Investigation and Arrests. Criminal charges have been filed, so let's look at the legal fallout of these alleged engineering failures. So, a special investigation team registered a suo motu case of culpable homicide and they rapidly arrested key figures across the chain of command. You've got the land leasee, Shambhunath Behera, you have the structural engineer and iron fabricator Kamal Samanta. You also have the site supervisor, the labor supplier, and a broker who allegedly helped obtain the building sanction from the Kolkata Municipal Corporation. Basically, the police are holding them accountable for the direct chain of command on that site. But there's a huge twist here. It's vital to note a major complication in the probe. The primary contractor on site, Asghar Hussain, actually perished in the disaster. This is the exact same individual who the labor unions had explicitly warned the port authorities about weeks prior. They noted his previous criminal record and an alleged history of unauthorized businesses on Portland. Obviously, his death adds a massive layer of complexity to finding out exactly what corners were cut on the ground level. Now for Section 6, the citywide fallout. Finally, let's zoom out and look at the macro-level impact this tragedy is having on Calcutta as a whole. The immediate actions go way beyond just the Taratala site. Alongside financial compensation from both the state and central governments, the state has ordered a massive suspension of all under-construction commercial projects across the entire Kolkata municipal area. This is going to stay in effect until safety audits are completed by agencies like IIT Kharagpur and RITES. Furthermore, this whole thing has sparked intense political debate. Current political leaders allege that the previous municipal administration improperly signed off on faulty building plans, specifically pointing to former Mayor Farhad Hakim's signature. As the active investigation neutrally unpacks these political claims, it really highlights how deeply intertwined civic administration and structural safety actually are. And all of this leaves us with a really lingering question to ponder. We've seen the incredibly heavy cost of ignored warnings, 11 lives lost, and a massive city's commercial construction sector just frozen. As these sweeping safety audits roll out across Kolkata, we really have to ask, will these measures finally enforce the strict standard of care required to prevent the next tragedy? Or is this reactive approach just too little, too late? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the structures around you.